84th installment of the LouieTeeNetwork podcast coming at you now. Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T. Welcome to the 84th installment of the LouieTeeNetwork podcast. I, of course, am your set man, Louie T. Thank you for joining me on the program today. Got a lot to chop it up with you about. We're going to have social media maneuvers today. It's Wednesday, so you know what that means. Start lining up your questions for me, your man, Louie T, and we'll chop it up a little bit later on in the show. Make sure if you want to address me or the show, simply use the hashtag LouieTLive to have your comment read in the comment section. If it's pertinent, we'll discuss and chop it up with the comment or question or topic that you bring up. I also want to talk about briefly, real quick, the NBA playoffs. I'm not watching a ton of this stuff. I'm not going to sit here and act as if I've been following this stuff every single game. I'm on the edge of my seat, but some of these games have been really entertaining. I actually watched the one last night. Not as entertaining as some of the games, Clips and Mavs, and even some of the games earlier in the Jazz and Nuggets series. You could tell it was Game 7. Teams were tight. I mean, hell, the final score was 80-78. So that tells you all you need to know. Jamal Murray, who had been killing the Jazz the entire series, I don't even know if he hit 20 points last night. I think he might have been at 17 or 18, but they still got the win. Donovan Mitchell, who had been destroying the Nuggets this entire series, he struggled mightily. They were talking about some injury, but at the end of the day, I just think it was the nerves of Game 7. I thought both teams struggled mightily, and hence the final score. But I really just was fascinated by the final sequence there. Jazz inbounding the ball down 2 with a chance to either tie the game or take the lead. They get it to their playmaker, Donovan Mitchell. He's poked from behind. The ball goes to Jamal Murray. He then leads a fast break with about 10 seconds left. First of all, he should have pulled that basketball out. I love the push, but he should have pulled that basketball out, and they should have been eating up clock, forcing the Jazz to have to foul with about 5 or 6 seconds left. You go to the free throw line, you make your free throws, it's a 4-point game, you win the basketball game, essentially. Instead, he pushes the basketball, and he passes it to his teammate, Craig, who misses the bunny, misses the layup, and it almost cost them because the Jazz get the rebound. Rudy Gobert then pushes the ball ahead. They get it up the court. Mike Conley ends up with a great look at a 3 that literally goes in and comes out. If he makes that bucket, the Nuggets go home. The Jazz move on to the second round of the postseason. That would have been demoralizing if you are the Nuggets. That's not the way they were supposed to play that situation, but it was interesting enough just seeing how it unfolded. A lot of times these NBA guys don't actually know how they're supposed to handle these situations. It's amazing what actually is being said in these timeouts, because you don't think you're going to get a steal in that situation, but you got to have the wherewithal and the knowledge to know the game. And I just don't think those guys understood the situation and having the situational awareness to know to pull that basketball out, not shoot it, and burn up. The clock is your friend in that situation. So the points really aren't the real issue. The clock is what you're looking to beat up. And they almost blew that. But anyway, I digress. Ton of topics to get to today, regarding the National Football League, which is what I love to talk about the most. And we'll get to a lot of those later on in the show as we wrap things up with garbage time. However, I do want to start the show off as we always do. And let me say this again before we get into the meat and potatoes of the show. If you're just joining us, make sure that you use the hashtag LouieTLive if you want to have your comment read in the comment section, because after we get to our gym dropping session, we will go to our segment, Social Media Maneuvers, where I answer your comments if they're pertinent, but I'm only going to respond to it if you have the hashtag LouieTLive. So with that being said, let's jump into our gym dropping session, shall we? Let me drop this gym on your melon. Open your mind, let your conscience be free. You're now rolling with your man, Louie T. Let me open you up, get you thinking a little bit. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about Jacksonville. I know it feels like we've been talking about the Jags a lot on this podcast lately. But we talked about them at the end of the show last episode about how they were releasing Leonard Fournette, and we'll talk a little bit more about that situation and Leonard Fournette himself a little bit later on in the program. But they were releasing Leonard Fournette. This is a team that has went through a transformation over the last year and a half, moving on from, or really 2.5 years or so. Remember, this is a team 2017 was in the AFC Championship game. They're a far cry from that now. They're not the same team. They moved on from Calais Campbell and now Jalen Ramsey, Calais Campbell, and now Leonard Fournette, all in the span of about, I'd say, a year and a half, or so. So, I mean, they've done, hell, I'd say it's probably less time than that. More like probably about closer to a year. They traded Ramsey last year, midpoint of the season, somewhere in there, a little bit earlier than the trade deadline. So there's been a lot of turnover in Jacksonville, and I think this was the final piece to that puzzle. But specifically, and I don't like having conversations like this because there's a guy actually coaching the Jacksonville Jaguars. His name is Doug Marrone, right? So there's actually someone occupying this spot that we're talking about as if no one is occupying this spot. However, I think it is a question that begs to be answered. And I saw it. I was perusing socials the other day, and I ran across an article that talked about, could we see a situation where Trevor Lawrence and Dabo Swinney both jettison Clemson for Jacksonville next offseason? So I find that to be very promiscuous because, again, Doug Marrone, a lot of things can change in a 9-month period. Doug Marrone could, light it up along with the stash, and all of a sudden they go 10-6 this year. They make it to the postseason and they win a game. There's no way they're firing Doug Marrone if that takes place. If they feel like they found their guy in Gardner Minshew, you're not even drafting a quarterback if you're Jacksonville. So many things could change, in the span of one NFL season. But the likelihood is that Jacksonville struggles this year. Marrone gets canned, and they decide that, they don't have their quarterback. Gardner Minshew isn't the guy, and that they're going to move on from him as the starter as well. And that means they would be looking for both a new head coach and a new quarterback. Now, in order for this to work, either Jacksonville needs to find themselves with the number 1 overall pick, or they need to be able to procure the services of Dabo Swinney and then go and get the number 1 pick. Either way, first of all, let me start by saying this. I don't see this happening, but it is an interesting topic of discussion because when you look at this situation, the Jags are in a unique situation. If this season doesn't go well for them, they're going to have, we talked about all the draft capital that they have at their disposal after trading Yannick Ngakoue, and add him to the list of the guys that have been moved on from Jacksonville from that 2017 team that helped them get to the AFC Championship game. And so when you look at this football team, they're vastly different. And if things don't go well, I still think they're a talented football team, especially on the defensive side. They still need some pieces offensively, but when you look at this team, it's an intriguing group of guys. It's a really talented roster. I've talked about this already, so I think it would be an intriguing job to a coach out there. Now, here's the thing. And first of all, Dabo Swinney strikes me as a college football coach only. I don't see Dabo Swinney making a great transition to the NFL. He's this aw shucks, I can't believe I'm here type of guy. I don't think that works in the NFL. And he might be a totally different guy behind the scenes. He comes off as unassuming and all of this. I just don't buy it. It may be an act for the cameras, and he may be a totally different guy with his team behind closed doors, but he seems a little aloof to me. I just don't see him being NFL head coaching material. He seems like he should be coaching young men that are impressionable, that are coming out of high school, that are looking for someone to lead them. I don't think he is someone that can coach and lead grown men. That being said, I think the only way that this is even a remote possibility for Jacksonville is if other teams around the league that have done something similar have success. We know the NFL is a copycat league. And so in order for Jacksonville to feel comfortable, maybe pulling the trigger on a guy like Dabo Swinney and having an opportunity to then draft the guy that he's been coaching at Clemson for the last 3 years in Trevor Lawrence, is to then go out and see some success from Carolina. They are the model. And really, to me, the real team that's the true measuring stick is Arizona, because they would have the closest situation to the one that we're trying to approach here in Jacksonville and we're talking about right now, which is you get the college coach that is very familiar with the pick that most likely is going to be number 1 overall in the quarterback. In that situation, it was Kyler Murray coming out of Oklahoma, but Cliff Kingsbury was very familiar with Kyler Murray. They played in the same conference. He recruited Kyler Murray very heavily, had nothing but glowing things to say about him, and talked about him back in October when he was still the coach of Texas Tech, how if he had the number 1 pick in the draft, he'd take Kyler Murray. So all those things kind of fell in place, and we saw how good they were year 1. Now, a lot of people expect Cliff Kingsbury and Kyler Murray to make beautiful music in year 2 and for them to take a quantum leap in year 2. I count me among those who feel like they're going to take a quantum leap in year 2, but that to me is, one of the measuring sticks there. You look at Arizona, if they have tremendous success this year, let's say they go 10-6 and they make the postseason, and then you look at Carolina with Matt Rule and Joe Brady coming back to the NFL after leaving LSU after having that monumental season, and all of a sudden Carolina surprises people and goes 8-8 or 9-7 and just misses the postseason or sneaks in the back door even. I think then you start to look at Jacksonville and they may see this college blueprint and say, hey, maybe this is something that we can adapt or adopt and have success with it. So I think it's going to really hinge upon the success of some of these other teams around the league. But honestly speaking, if I'm Dabo Swinney, you got a cushy job at Clemson. You're making a ton of money. You can do no wrong at Clemson. You're a powerhouse in college football. You get a lot of the better athletes in college football. You play in a really weak ACC that you're going to dominate for years to come. If I'm Dabo Swinney, I'm not leaving Clemson. I'm sorry, I'm just not. But money talks and everything else walks. And if the Jacksonville Jaguars open up their wallets and it's a big enough check, who knows? Dabo Swinney says, hey, not only am I getting my guy Trevor Lawrence, because the Jaguars were 3-13 last year and they got the number 1 pick in the draft, but I'm also going to make a ton of money, and they've got a talented roster, and I think I can help them turn it around very quickly because they've got 4 picks in the first 2 rounds of the draft next year, 2 of which are first rounders, and the first one is a number 1 overall pick where I'm going to get my guy Trevor Lawrence. I think I can help turn this thing around sooner rather than later. So I don't know. We'll see what that situation kind of progresses into. I don't think it's much of anything. I think it's just a conversation that we're having. It's an interesting thought, something that you throw out there, a little food for thought, and you let everybody else do the dishes. However, I think this is interesting, but I don't think it's something that will truly actually take place. But, we've seen stranger things happen. No one thought Cliff Kingsbury was going to be an NFL head coach after he got fired from Texas Tech. Now, did we? And you see what he's doing now in the league. So I wouldn't count Dabo Swinney out. But again, he does not strike me as NFL head coaching material. And if I'm Dabo Swinney, I don't give a damn what amount of money you're talking about. I'm not leaving Clemson. I'm just not. It's too good of a job. Nick Saban was very fortunate to leave LSU, go to the Miami Dolphins, realized that he had made a monumental mistake and end up at Alabama. Everything kind of fell in place, which is why he left during the season and went and took that Alabama job, because he couldn't wait. Someone else was going to get hired if Saban didn't act immediately, and he understood that I can't get a better job than this going back to college football. I had a great job at LSU. I left for the allure of the NFL, only to find out that college is where it's at. And now I'm getting a chance to go back to Bama, and he took it. And a lot of people killed him for that in a moment, chastised him. Players were angry, and the Dolphins weren't that bad. He was actually helping turn around that program. But The allure of college football was calling his name, and he went back. If I'm Dabo Swinney, I'm not allowing the allure of the NFL to get me away from what is one of the top jobs in all of college football. I just don't see it happening. But again, interesting thought there. Little food for thought, if you will. I'll allow you guys to do the dishes. So let's now transition into social media maneuvers. So this is where I open the floor to you guys, allow you to have the floor and discuss whatever topics you want to discuss. Again, use the hashtag LouieTLive in the comment section. If you want your comment to be read, again, it needs to be pertinent for it to be read and discussed on the program. But let's jump into social media maneuvers and see what we have. I do see a super chat, so I'm going to get to that first. And remember, if you want to jump to the front of the line, the way to do that is through super chats. They get you straight to the front of the line. No questions, no equivocations. So got a super chat, going to take that one first, and then we'll start knocking out these comments one by one. So I do want to say this before I get into the comments. If you haven't already done so, what are you waiting on? Make sure you subscribe to the Louie T Network for more great content first and foremost. Make sure you turn on that notification bell so you don't miss a thing. And I'll give you a little bit of a reminder here. Also, make sure that you like this video if you haven't done that either. And also check out the merch down in the comments section. There are a couple of links that will allow you to shop the Louie T Network merch, whether you do it via the site LouieTeeNetwork.net, that's revamped, or you do it through the Print Champs. Both of those links down below. Check it out. I've got my, if you can see it, I've got my Washington football team shirt on today, sporting my Red Wolves support. I've really opened up to the thought of Red Wolves being the name of this team, so I'm cool with that. That's my Red Wolves election tee. You can get that exclusively on the LouieTeeNetwork.net, or you can get that off of the Print Champs. But make sure you check it out and support your man Louie T by getting you some merch. Also, don't forget about the Louie T Network exclusives. Those are the different activities we have going on with the brand. You can access those via the site LouieTeeNetwork.net. Go to the exclusives tab. There you'll find the Soul Survivor pool, Winners and Losers League, which is a weekly pick'em pool, but it's for the entire season. Obviously, there's a pot, no winnings at the end. I was your champ last year. I plan on being the champ yet again because this is what I do. I pick winners. That's all I do. And then, of course, it's the weekly pick'em pool, which is individual week in and week out. Cash prizes are given out at the end of the week. You get in, you win, you get paid. So check that out as well. So let's get to social media maneuvers, shall we? And we start with our first super chat. It's from Barrett Downing. Thank you for the super chat, Barrett Downing. Greatly appreciate you, as always, BD, representing and holding me down. Thank you for the super chat. BD says, what up, Lou? Always good hearing you. I ordered your merch. Keep grinding. I appreciate you, BD, man. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you so much for the support. As always, I can always count on you. Thank you so much. Got another comment. This one is from my man, JP. He says, Haskins is officially starting week 1. Great for him. Now let's go kick Philadelphia's ass and shut up all those annoying ass Eagles fans. I'm going to do a video on that, a separate video on that, but definitely saw the news. And I told you guys this not even a week ago, that Rivera was going to reveal this sooner rather than later. I didn't think he was going to draw this thing out. Haskins had been taking, I told you guys, like 99% of the first team reps Haskins had been taking in practice. I mean, this was a no-brainer. It was obvious. So there really wasn't any competition. We saw what Kyle Allen was last year. I think the staff knew what Kyle Allen was. He was more brought here as a safety valve, a safety blanket, if you will. Hey, this guy knows the system. Worst case scenario, if Dwayne isn't what we thought or we got any issues, Kyle can step in with this abbreviated offseason. He knows the offense, and we'll feel comfortable with him being able to step in and run it competently. But make no mistake about it, Alex Smith wasn't going to be healthy enough to challenge Dwayne Haskins, and Kyle Allen simply isn't good enough to challenge Dwayne Haskins. This was always Haskins' job to lose. He did nothing but show professionalism, growth, and everything that the staff asked of him, leadership, things of that nature. And so we knew this was a foregone conclusion, was just waiting for the announcement. Rivera told the team today that Dwayne is your starter for week 1 and hopefully moving forward. And again, not a surprise there, but just good to know that we could put that behind us and now focus on trimming this roster down to 53 guys and also getting ready for the Philadelphia Eagles week number 1. So I don't see any more comments. So with that being said, social media maneuvers is going to be extremely quick, and we will then move on to our next segment, which is garbage time. So, a lot to get to on garbage time today. I talked about this briefly yesterday. Saints had an issue with Alvin Kamara. He hadn't been at practice for the last 3 days, and then there was this whole, mess of a situation that was starting to evolve. You had a situation where Alvin Kamara and his camp were saying that these were excused absences. He was injured. The team knew about it. Then you had the team saying, no. These aren't excused absences. We don't know what he's talking about. This probably has something to do with the contract. Then there was this brief period where Alvin Kamara was being shopped potentially. That was reported. I never believed any of it because he's too vital to the success of the Saints football team. Again, if they're going to do something with Alvin Kamara, it's not going to be this year because they have a legitimate shot at winning something with Alvin Kamara. Without him, they're not the same football team. If you're going to do something with Alvin Kamara, it would be after this year where Drew Brees may not be in the fold any longer, but it's not going to be this year. He's just too important of a piece to what they do in New Orleans. So that situation reportedly has been resolved. Kamara came in, talked with Sean Payton, cleared the air. Really, this is about a contract. When it all boils down to is Alvin Kamara grossly underpaid for what he provides for this Saints offense. They understand that this guy was not a first-round pick. He's not making a ton of money. And you know what makes it a lot worse is that you look around the league and you look at your peers and you look at your standing in the league and where you feel like you belong, and you see all these guys getting paid good money, and you're saying, where is mine? You look up Christian McCaffrey, who probably is the best back in football, especially if you're talking all-purpose. Him and Saquon Barkley go neck and neck. Those are going to be your first 2 picks of any fantasy football draft, more likely than not. However, Kamara looks at himself as a very versatile running back, a guy that can run it in between the tackles, can run it outside, and just like McCaffrey can catch it as well. So he thinks his value is extremely high, which it is. And, he's coming off of an injury-riddled season, but he felt like I put myself out on the line for you guys last year. I was playing with a sprained MCL last year. It might have even been torn, reports were, and he kept playing. So this was a guy that toughed it out for the good of the team, battled through some injuries last year, has been extremely productive in his career, and he's looking up, and McCaffrey's getting broken off, and he turns around, and now Joe Mixon is getting some tremendous money, and Derrick Henry just got a long-term deal, and he's saying, look, man, I understand that our situation is different from Tennessee or Cincinnati's or even Carolina, but hey, man, I need to be paid, bruh. I need my money. So he's looking up and saying, where's mine? And the Saints are like, okay, Alvin, we hear you. All right, just come back to practice, and we'll try to figure this thing out. We'll try to get you a long-term deal. We understand where you're coming from, but let's figure this out reasonably. All right, so let's come back. Let's quiet the noise. Let's get rid of all the drama that comes with you not being here, and we'll figure this thing out. So sounds like they're going to try to figure out a long-term deal for him. Nothing is imminent, it seems like, but they are discussing, and it could be imminent, and we could hear something today or tomorrow. But my money is we won't hear anything until probably sometime next week. Something's going to get done, I presume, before the season starts, because, again, we saw this situation and how a simple injury, he probably could have been practicing, but you tweak an ankle or you stub a toe and you're like, you know what? This toe hurts a little bit more because I'm not paid right now. So, Joe Mixon, it was amazing. He had migraines the other day. All of a sudden now, 4-year deal, $48 million richer. All of a sudden now, those migraines sure have went away very quickly. So money makes a lot of ailments feel better a lot faster. We'll see what happens in New Orleans. Speaking of guys getting money, all right, we'll start there with Joe Mixon. His 4-year, $48 million deal in Cincinnati makes him one of the highest paid running backs in the league, $12 million per. Now, obviously, all of that isn't guaranteed money, and Cincinnati usually does a good job of front-loading contracts. They don't give out a ton of guarantees, but they'll front-load his contract. He'll get a lot of his bread up front, and then we'll see what happens on the back end of that deal. But good for Joe Mixon. We all know the story about how rough it was for him coming into the league after some controversy that he brought on himself with the whole situation of hitting a female, hitting her really hard at that. But nonetheless, kind of scared some teams away. The talent was undeniable, but there were questions about his character. He's done nothing but been a model of consistency for Cincinnati, a bad football team, which is why not a lot of people understand how good he's been for the Bengals since coming in the league. But this is a guy that has been on the straight and narrow and hasn't had any issues. And so good for him. He gets a massive deal. And I've said this a million times. I'm going to continue to say this till my face turns blue because I don't know if a lot of you are listening. And I get it. I understand you're thinking I'm batshit crazy, and I get that. I'm not sleeping on Cincinnati, and neither should you. They've got talent. I've said this about Jacksonville. I've said it about Cincinnati. I've said it about Dallas. You know how I feel about some of these teams that really get the draft. Baltimore as well. Cincinnati's in that discussion. They know how to draft. They've got a talented football team. Joe Burrow, if they can keep him upright, if they can keep him standing up straight, they have a chance to be dynamic. When you look at their receiver core, I take their 4 receivers, if healthy, over a lot of teams' first 4 wide receivers. I mean, you're not going to find a more talented group. Now, again, health is the key. But when you talk about it's AJ Green, when you talk about T. Higgins, when you talk about John Ross, again, got to be healthy. And then you talk about Tyler Boyd. That's a hell of a foursome, guys. And then you throw Joe Mixon in the mix. They've got some young tight ends on that football team. They've got talent offensively. I'm not quite sure about their defense. They went to the Minnesota Vikings store. We talked about that in the secondary. One of those guys left camp because his dad was missing, ended up laying hands on someone that he thought was responsible for his dad being missing. And now he ended up in jail. So don't know how that situation is going to end up with Mackenzie Alexander. But he's not there right now. And again, Trey Waynes got injured. So, some of that stuff that they got from the Minnesota Vikings store already going a little sour for this Cincinnati Bengals team, as Trey Wayne's going to miss a vast majority of the season with an injury that he sustained a couple of weeks ago. So I don't know about their defense, but man, they got some offense, and Joe Mixon being locked up is a good sign for the Cincinnati Bengals. We stay in that lane and talk about contracts being handed out. New money for offensive tackle Taylor Decker of the Detroit Lions. He gets paid brand new 6-year, $85 million contract. Really what it amounts to is a 4-year, $60 million extension. But for the sake of the agents involved, we'll give the entire contract, which is 6 years, $85 million, 37 and a half of it guaranteed. So Taylor Decker cashing in. He's been a rock on the left side of that offensive line for the Detroit Lions. And we've seen some offensive linemen get paid this offseason. Deion Dawkins was paid a couple of weeks ago by the Buffalo Bills as well. So we've seen some of these good left tackles in the league get broken off. Add Taylor Decker to that list. Now you start talking about some injuries. We've talked about some of them here on this podcast numerous times. The injury reaper is out to task, as always, this time of the year. And he's out busy doing his due diligence and his work, as he always seems to do, whether they're in San Diego or in Los Angeles. The Chargers just can't seem to escape the injury reaper. I have my man Craig, who I love chopping it up, talking to about the Chargers, said, look, man, it doesn't matter where we are. The Reaper's headquarters is in the Chargers facility. Wherever we go, he follows us and he sets up shop, and they just can't seem to shake that bug. They lose Derwin James, their all-world safety. Again, it seems like this guy cannot stay healthy, and this goes all the way back to his Florida State days. You're talking about a guy that had an entire season missed due to a torn ACL at Florida State, comes back, has a really good rookie campaign, gives everybody exactly what they thought he would be. He actually played a season at Florida State afterwards to get that draft stock back to where it was before the injury. Gets to the NFL, has a stellar rookie season, wets everybody's palate, and then the injuries start to take effect, and he just hasn't been able to stay healthy. This time, he's out with a torn meniscus. He's done for the year. There was initial reports that, hey, he could just miss some of the year. Depends on the prognosis after they have the MRI and really take a closer look at this and just determine what kind of procedure needs to be done. Well, he needed a full surgery, which is going to require at least 6 months of healing, which means he's done for this season yet again. So that's a real stinger for a defense that they prided themselves on adding all of this speed to their defense. Derwin James is going to be one of the centerpieces of that defense, but they had added all this speed in the offseason. Everyone else in the division was adding offensive speed. The Raiders did, so did the Broncos. We already know what the Chiefs are. They said, you know what, we're going to go in the opposite direction and try to stop all of your explosive dynamic offenses by going out and getting guys that can match your quickness and speed. On the defensive side, and Derwin James was going to be one of the centerpieces of that, he is no longer available this season, so we'll see what the Chargers decide to do there. There was this report, or this was floated out, that maybe the Chargers should look into Earl Thomas. He's comfortable with the Gus Bradley system that they play out there in Los Angeles, being that Gus Bradley was once in Seattle, and that's pretty much the defense that he runs. Maybe Earl Thomas would be a candidate and a guy that could come in and fill that void. Maybe, but it's amazing that Earl Thomas hasn't found a home quite yet. And the crazy part isn't that he hasn't found a home. I haven't even heard anybody interested or banging this man's door down. We haven't even heard about teams looking to inquire about him. He'll sign somewhere eventually, but it's just weird that nothing has happened. Normally, guys of his stature and ilk, they come off the board that quick. They become free agents, and within a day or two, they're signed. That has not been the case with Earl Thomas, but maybe that's the destination for him now in Los Angeles with the Chargers. Another injury, staying in the AFC West, Tyrell Williams is done for the year with a torn labrum. Remember, we talked about this on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, or maybe last week, that he was going to try and play through this. He was going to try to test it out, see if he could get through this torn labrum that he had already found out he had, and he was going to see if he could tolerate the pain and, how his range of motion would be, and if this was something that he could get through the entire year. The answer is no. This is not something he can play through. He's going to have the surgery required to heal, and it's going to take some time, and he's going to be lost for the season. This is a big blow to what is a young wide receiver core for the Las Vegas Raiders. Look, they're going to be relying on a couple of rookies in Ruggs and the South Carolina wide receiver, and then you turn around and look at a second-year wide receiver in the slot receiver out of Clemson. They're a young team out there in Oakland. A lot of young receivers. They could have used a veteran like Tyrell Williams, and I felt really good about Williams being kind of slid back into his role as the second receiver with Ruggs coming on board. And now all of a sudden, he's out of the mix, and it's just a really young group of receivers in Vegas. We'll see what they're able to do with that offense. They're going to miss Tyrell Williams, I think, very, very much. And also, we talked about Taylor Decker getting new money. Kenny Golladay now is supposed to be in talks with the Lions. Remember, we talked about the Lions and their wide receivers and how all three of their big-time wide receivers are up after the year, whether you're talking Kenny Golladay, you're talking Marvin Jones, or you're talking Danny Amendola. All three of them are going to be up at the end of this season. And so I figured Galladay is the guy that they have to have back. The other two, if they're gone, you move on. And I told you that Quintez Cephas has been a revelation for them as a 5th rounder out of Wisconsin. So, they'll be just fine. But Galladay is the key. That's the one that they have to have back. Sounds like they understand that, and they're in contract discussions with him. Doesn't sound like anything's imminent, but the fact that those conversations are taking place lets you know where that situation is and what they think of Kenny Galladay. And as I've mentioned already, he's one more big-time year in terms of production away from solidifying himself as one of the elite wide receivers in the National Football League. And also, Leonard Fournette cleared waivers, so the Jaguars finally did move on from Leonard Fournette after seeking a trade. No one came and stepped up to the plate. Fournette was then released. He cleared waivers, which is something that I did not think was going to happen. I thought someone would put in a waiver claim. I think, and I did say this, that the amount of money that he's making in the final year of his deal would probably deter some teams. I didn't think it would deter every team in the league, but I did think it would deter some teams. That $4 million salary that he was due in 2020, I thought was going to be a bit of a turnoff for some teams. But I thought some teams would, maybe 2 or 3 would overlook it, and there would be a waiver claim or 2 put in for him. No waiver claims for Leonard Fournette, which again continues to raise the question, what's wrong with Leonard Fournette? I think it's got to be something in the locker room. Maybe there's something that we don't know. I've contested and contended all along that it's something going on behind the scenes that we're not privy to, because I went back, because this was the thing. 2017 was his rookie season. He rushed for over 1,000 yards. He helped Jacksonville get to the AFC Championship game. He was big time for them. 18 was an injury-riddled season. Wasn't the same guy, yada, yada, yada. But last year, you just think, and I remember I had brought this up because someone had tweeted me and said, oh man, it seems like Fournette's been going downhill ever since that, a brawl with the Bills. And I said, he's been going downhill since 2017. That's not true. I went back and watched a little bit of him last year just to get a feel of what he was doing a little bit more, because I've watched the Jacksonville Jaguars play, but wasn't really paying attention all that much, to what Fournette specifically was doing. And I went and looked at the numbers. I went and watched a couple of games, and I said, man, I watched 2 of his better games. Leonard Fournette was really good last year, and I didn't realize just how good he was. But when you go back and you look at the numbers, Leonard Fournette rushed for over 1,100 yards. I think he rushed for right around 1,200 yards. And he caught, what was mind-boggling was how many catches he had. He had over 50 catches. I want to say he was in that 60 ballpark. And he had over 500 yards receiving, which I didn't think he had done. And that wasn't his strong suit coming out of LSU. He wasn't supposed to be a dynamic pass catcher out of the backfield. So his versatility to not only run it, but catch it. And he was extremely durable last year. I think he played in 15 games. So I think there's this misconception out there about Fournette, and because I was listening to a lot of media types talk about how they were so disappointed. Tim Hasselbeck was beside himself. Maurice Jones-Drew was absolutely hysterical at the fact that the Jaguars could do something like this, get rid of what he claimed to be their best offensive player and by far the best running back they have on their roster, which he's not wrong in saying that latter portion of that statement. And so he couldn't understand how they could do something like this. Again, it's got to be something about the character in the locker room. He's got to be a malcontent. That's the only thing that makes sense for me here. Otherwise, this doesn't make any sense from an on-the-field production standpoint. So, shocked that no one put in a waiver claim. He's still lingering out there. I think he wants to make somewhere close to the $4 million that he was due this year. I don't know if anybody's going to pay him. As a matter of fact, I can assure you no one's looking to pay him that. That's why a waiver claim wasn't put in for him. And then, the Patriots were floated out there as a team. I felt like they had enough running backs as is, but they were floated out there as a team that could be interested. There was a report that I read earlier today that shot that notion down, said the Patriots aren't interested. I know the Washington football team's name came up in that same article initially that I read that said the Patriots and the Washington football team would be 2 likely destinations for him. I don't think they're interested in Leonard Fournette either, although if they did decide to take a flyer on him, I would not be disappointed by that. Again, as long as they could vet him and talk to some people, find out if there is some issues with him in the locker room and how he gets along with his teammates and things of that nature. If they check all of that stuff and all of those boxes are checked and he's fine and those things work out, I wouldn't have a problem with them, going after Leonard Fournette. But it's not necessary. You understand what I'm saying? It's not something that they need to do. And so interesting to see if there are no injuries at the running back position prior to the season. Does Leonard Fournette land somewhere? I assume so, but we're getting close to the season. No one put in a waiver claim. We'll see. He's a young guy, healthy, prime of his career. I find it hard to believe that he won't end up on an NFL roster this year. So with that being said, let's now get ready to get out of here. And I really appreciate you guys tuning in for the 84th installment of the Louie T Network podcast. Going to tell you right now, there will be no Friday podcast, as this is the last Friday without football the day prior. So I'm going to go ahead, take this opportunity to run a bunch of errands, do a bunch of things, because it's the last Friday that I will have that will be free before the season starts, because the following Friday will be the day after Thursday Night Football. The season would have started, and we will be in full go mode at that point. So I'm going to take this Friday off, but next week we'll be back to 3 pods a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. It'll be a much more structured setup. Each pod will be shot at a specific time. You'll know those times ahead of time, so you won't have to guess as to when. The Wednesday pod will be at noon. I can tell you that right now with social media maneuvers. The Friday pod will probably be at noon as well. The only pod that will be at a different time, probably a little bit later on, like 4 o'clock, will be the Monday pod, because that one will involve me having to watch all of the games so that I can talk about them on the podcast. So that one will be a little bit later on in the day, but 12 o'clock noon will be the time that we'll be live doing this podcast on Wednesdays and Fridays in the future. So with that being said, remember, if it's not your man T, it's not, I repeat, not the best NFL coverage it could be. I know I did have a super chat. I do want to read that real quick. I don't want to get out of here without reading that one. So let me knock out that super chat. Juan Gotti talking sports. My man Juan Gotti, thank you for the super chat. Make sure you sub up my man Juan Gotti if you haven't already done so. Says Haskins' name started, MVP season incoming. Watch. I don't know about that. I do know he was named the starter, and I am excited about Haskins in the upcoming season. I think he's going to prove a lot of people wrong this year, and I think he's poised for a breakout season. MVP is a stretch, but I definitely believe he's going to be a lot better than people think. Now, he's going to need some help. We've talked about that ad nauseum, but if guys step up, if the offensive line is good enough, I think he could be a problem this year and for many years to come. Thank you for that super chat, Juan Gotti. And on that note, I am going to glide to the side. As I mentioned before, make sure you like this video. Make sure you subscribe to the Louie T Network for more great content. If you haven't already done so, turn on that notification bell so you don't miss a thing. Also, make sure you hit that like button and show some support to the Louie T Network. Again, I got my merch on, got my Redskin tee on, or excuse me, my Washington football tee on. As you can see there, I'll be rocking that again on Thursday night, and I'll continue to advertise the merch. Get you some, support the Louie T Network by getting you some merch, whether it's a hoodie or a shirt or what may have you. I appreciate you, man. Greatly appreciate you and your support for the movement. That being said, I'm out of here, guys. 84th installment of the Louie T Network podcast in the books. You guys have a good one. Take care.
Louie.